Hey, everybody. It is Tuesday, September 2nd. One of you might be waking up a billionaire today if you won Powerball last night. Jill, it might be you. It might be me. Did you buy tickets?
It is not me. Yeah, no, we didn't buy tickets.
Okay. Well, we bought tickets. I had Olivia choose numbers. So we're recording this late on Monday night. So there's a chance you might not hear from me today. If I somehow pulled off the 1 in 270 million chance of being a Powerball winner. But let's get to the basics here. I'm Moshe Wanunu, and this is the Mo News Podcast.
And I'm Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. And sometimes we buy Powerball tickets, Jill, because, you know, hope springs eternal.
And if you do win the Powerball, you might be able to afford, I don't know, the most expensive house currently on the market. It is in Aspen, Colorado, built in 1994, 74 acres. 27,000 square feet, 18 bedrooms, 20 bathrooms, and Moshe, it'll cost one very wealthy person $300 million.
Yes, this went viral over the weekend. Is allegedly the most expensive house on the market in America right now, $300 million home. Jill, even if you win the Powerball and you do the lump sum, that's about $500 million pre-taxes. So you still, I guess you could do the down payment, but that heating bill on a 27,000 square foot house in Aspen, that's gotta be, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, what are the property taxes on that thing?
How many staff do you need to clean a 18 bedroom, 20 bathroom? I don't think they even are talking about the half bathrooms there. I think that's 20 full bathrooms, 74 acres. That's a lot of landscaping too, Jill. This apparently is called Little Lake Lodge. It's owned by the Resnick family. Some of you in California especially might be familiar with them. Some of you around the world might be familiar with them. They're the billionaires behind Fiji Water and Palm Wonderful. But in particular in California, they struck a deal to basically corner part of the water supply in California to handle all of the agriculture they have going on, all the crops that they have going on. So the Resnick family has put their $300 million home for sale. I don't know if that's what you want to do with your Powerball winnings. I feel like you could probably settle for a house that's a cool, I don't know, a tenth of that, $30 million, or 100th of that, $3 million. Still get you a pretty, in Larry David's words, nice house that is cheaper to heat than a 27,000 square foot estate with 74 acres.
We could dream. We can dream.
I feel like I've been to a number of hotels that are smaller than this property.
You had me at heating bill. I can't process a house this big.
And hold on, this is not even their main property. They live in California. This is the house they go to once in a while. So we'll see if it's on the market for less time than Michael Jordan's house, which by the way was a tenth of the cost here in Chicago. But famously, he just couldn't find a buyer for it. And it was on the market for years. And so we'll see if the $300 million house in Aspen we'll keep you up to date. And by the way, if one of you buys it, just give us the heads up. Give us the scoop here at Mo News.
Well, that's the thing. There's only a handful of people in the world who could actually afford a house like that.
It's like the Qatari plane that the Qatari government gave Trump, right? It was literally a full-size commercial jet. They had on the market for years, couldn't sell it. And so then they gave it to the president. And that's part of the story that's not told about the Qatari jet is that
they didn't want it.
No, they couldn't sell it. The Qataris couldn't sell it on
the
used private plane market because again, there's a handful of people on Earth or governments on Earth that can afford a $400 million plane. And so they're like, you know what, Mr. Trump, this is a gift from us to you. We couldn't sell it for a few years.
It's all coming together. All right, let's get to some headlines here. We are starting off with federal courts dealing two setbacks to the Trump administration. Amid a whole bunch of immigration news, a federal judge temporarily blocked the planned deportation of a group of Guatemalan children. That decision has angered the White House.
Yeah, so we'll have the latest there, including White House threats to get aggressive with Chicago this week on the immigration front. Also in legal news, another federal court ruled late Friday that Trump completely overstepped his authority on tariffs. That means a number of the tariffs that are currently in effect are technically unconstitutional, according to this appeals court. This could spell a lot of trouble. We will break this all down and tell you what to expect at the Supreme Court in the coming months. And Jill, while we're on White House news, we'll get to those rumors about President Trump's health over the weekend. I don't know if you spent any time on social media, but it was all the rage in certain circles.
Health? I mean, people thought he died. That was the rumor.
Right. And we should just say the president is alive, but we'll tell you what was behind all of that.
Overseas, a devastating earthquake hit eastern Afghanistan. Hundreds of people were killed, thousands injured. And staying overseas, a meeting of what's being called the Axis of Upheaval. The leaders of Russia, India, and China leading a meeting of a couple dozen countries. It's viewed as a counterweight to the United States and the West.
At the same time, Russia accused over the weekend of jamming the navigation of the head of the EU's plane, leading the pilots of that plane to have to use paper maps to land safely.
Back in the U.S., the latest on that school shooting in Minneapolis last week.
Yeah, a follow-up on that 10-year-old. We played a bit of his heartbreaking testimony, what we're learning about his condition this week.
President Trump giving Rudy Giuliani the Presidential Medal of Freedom after the former New York City mayor was badly hurt this weekend in a car crash in New Hampshire.
Jill, it's quite a tale. We'll have it for you.
Some new data painting a startling picture about how doctors are prescribing ADHD drugs to kids. And you might have seen this viral video over the weekend, a Polish CEO apologizing after snatching a tennis player's hat from a young kid at the U.S. Open. Moshe, the internet has thoughts.
The internet has thoughts, Jill. This one did not have to do with Coldplay or a kiss cam, but another CEO in trouble for a viral video.
And Moshe has on this day in history.
Jill, on this day in history, a certain American leader coined the phrase, speak softly and carry a big stick. Can you name that person? 124 years ago today.
Moshe, he may or may not have roots right here where I am located on Long Island.
A Long Island native. Jill definitely knows who this person was.
All right, officials in Chicago bracing for a major federal immigration enforcement operation. It could begin as soon as this week. Chicago's mayor signed an order over the weekend aimed at resisting the Trump administration's planned crackdown as it's getting ready to surge immigration and customs enforcement agents in the city. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem on Sunday praised the federal immigration surge in LA back in June. So remember, that was the surge that led to protests. Those protests got violent at times earlier this summer. Local residents protesting the Trump administration, and then eventually the Trump administration deployed the National Guard to the city. So a similar immigration operation is expected to kick off in Chicago this week and potentially be backed by National Guard forces in a peacekeeping role. Here's a little bit of her comments from the weekend.
We've already had ongoing operations with ICE in Chicago and throughout Illinois and other states, making sure that we're upholding our laws. But we do intend to add more resources to those operations. I won't disclose the details because they are law enforcement and investigative folks that are on the ground there, and I want to make sure we keep their security our number one priority. But we will continue to go after the worst of the worst across the country, like President Trump has told us to do, focusing on those that are perpetuating murder and rape and trafficking of drugs and humans across our country, knowing that every single citizen deserves to be safe.
Noem didn't give specifics as to what that could look like, but it does come after the Trump administration sent National Guard troops to Washington, D.C., and took over the police department to target crime, immigration, and homelessness.
So we're talking about a couple things here. We're talking about immigration enforcement actions and potential National Guard deployment. Trump has been going back and forth with Chicago for a couple of weeks now. It's not clear whether, and I'm talking to folks who have connections at the White House, whether they're sure they have legal authority to go ahead and override the governor of Illinois when it comes to National Guard deployment. But in the meantime, he could surge ICE officers and Customs and Border Protection officers into Chicago like he did in LA. That could instigate things, and then Trump could try to do what he did in LA, which is then send in National Guard troops. We'll see what happens. As far as the numbers right now, there's been more than 200,000 deportations in the first 7 months of the Trump administration. Notably, in July, the number of arrests and deportations of non-criminal undocumented migrants surpassed criminals. So historically, the priority has always been on criminals, as in folks who are undocumented here, who've actually committed crimes here, and trying to deport them. Now, the Trump administration have taken things up a notch, and they have been increasingly focused on anyone who's an undocumented migrant here, which I should mention is a civil offense, but not a criminal offense. So those numbers of non-criminals versus criminals have surged in the last couple of months, and now it appears the administration is deporting more non-criminals than criminals. This has been a significant debate within the administration, also within interest groups, because you have a lot of business groups out there that are like, hey, can you just focus on criminals? Because significant industries are supported by undocumented migrants without a criminal background. We're talking construction, agriculture, hotel industry, service industry, restaurants. There are some interesting numbers that came out over the weekend that the U.S. is down about 1.2 million workers, immigrant workers, just this year. That's the most significant drop in years. Now, a number of these folks have been deported. Some of them, quote unquote, self-deport due to just the nature of things. A number of them just might not be showing up to work right now, given what we've seen playing out. So you have seen these immigration hardliners like Stephen Miller within the White House who are making a push to just find anyone who's undocumented. And then you have business groups who are like, we totally support the push to get out criminal illegals, but not folks who have been working here for years or decades potentially. And the hope among business leaders is that they can find a path to citizenship. So interesting numbers there. We're going to watch Chicago very closely here. Chicago and Illinois as a state have some of the strongest rules against cooperating with federal authorities on immigration enforcement. You have a number of states and localities, Florida, Texas, Arizona, across the country, where there's a lot of cooperation between local law enforcement. But then you have what is called these quote unquote sanctuary cities, like Chicago and other mainly blue cities, that say we're not cooperating with the feds. Here, the governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, calls the actions anti-American. He's been particularly critical of the Trump administration. They go back and forth a lot. And the Illinois governor is saying he doesn't want to see a, quote, invasion of national troops into the city. Jill, you mentioned the violent crime crackdown in D.C. That's a unique situation given that D.C. doesn't have full authority over itself. The Congress effectively oversees D.C., whereas Chicago and Illinois, among the other 50 states, have governors, and it's much more difficult for the White House legally to override these things. In California, there's still a legal case going on in regards to that National Guard deployment.
Staying with immigration, a federal judge did block one of President Trump's latest deportation actions on Sunday. Hundreds of Guatemalan children who crossed the U.S. border without a parent or guardian cannot be deported at the moment. In a flurry of last-minute legal challenges, a Biden-appointed judge issued a 14-day order halting the deportation of unaccompanied Guatemalan children. The kids cited in the case were between the ages of 10 and 16. Some were reportedly already on planes about to be flown back when that order came down. During the hearing, the judge criticized the government for trying to deport children in the early hours of a holiday weekend, calling the move surprising. In the ruling, she wrote, quote, "I don't want there to be any ambiguity about what I am ordering. You cannot remove any children."
Yeah, the chaotic and last-minute court developments here, as people are literally being loaded onto a plane, planes about to take off, definitely resembled what we saw back in March, where hundreds of Venezuelans were on planes and had just taken off as a judge was considering an order to have them stay in the U.S. The judge then gave that order, but Trump officials said, well, too late, they're already in the air. And so you saw them eventually land there in El Salvador. This situation is very different, though. Many of these kids reportedly came here with human smugglers, don't have guardians here, don't have parents here. They've been in the custody of the Health and Human Services Department. It's not clear how many of them have parents back in Guatemala they want to go home to or can go home to, or whether they face violence there. And that's something the judge here wanted to know more about before allowing the U.S. government to bring them back. By law, unaccompanied minors have to be sheltered and cared for by the U.S. government. The Trump administration apparently had planned to deport up to 600 Guatemalan children without any court hearings, and that's when the judge intervened here after an emergency order was filed by lawyers on behalf of those children. The lawyers argue the children were not told about their planned deportations, and that by doing this, the government was denying these kids a chance to seek asylum here in the U.S., warning that they face abuse, neglect, or persecution back in Guatemala. One 10-year-old said in one of the court filings here, "I do not have family in Guatemala that can take good care of me." A 16-year-old recalled, quote, "threats against my life." Now, the Trump administration pushes back here, saying that the government of Guatemala requested the return of these kids, and the U.S. was working to facilitate the reunification of these kids with their families. Trump advisor Stephen Miller, who I mentioned just a couple minutes ago, blamed the Biden administration for this judge. The judge who overturned this or blocked this was a Biden appointee, saying that these kids have now been, quote, orphaned in America and not allowed to be reunified with their parents. But again, you have the Trump administration saying, we're working with Guatemala on this. Everything was on the level. Why are you getting in the way? The judge saying, hold on one second. You can't do this without a court hearing. I need more information before you let these planes take off.
Another pillar of President Trump's second-term agenda also faced some pushback from the courts this weekend and is expected to soon come before the Supreme Court. It is Trump's sweeping tariffs policy hitting a major roadblock. On Friday, a federal appeals court ruled 7-4 that Trump went too far when he declared national emergencies to justify tariffs on nearly every country that the U.S. trades with. Trump bypassed congressional approval. He cited an emergency law dating back to 1977. In a more than 100-page ruling, the federal court said it is unlikely that Congress ever intended to give the president unlimited power to tax imports under that law. That decision upholds a lower court ruling. So now they are giving Trump until mid-October to appeal to the Supreme Court before the ruling takes effect. Attorney General Pam Bondi said on social media the administration will appeal. The International Emergency Economic Powers Act is what Trump cited to impose the tariffs, but it actually doesn't mention tariffs.
This has been a trend line we've been watching, Jill, as he's been trying to stretch executive power here based on various laws or trying to use executive orders and then seeing some pushback from the courts. When it comes to tariffs, if we go way back, the Constitution says that Congress has the power to tariff. But like a number of things Congress has or has not been doing in the past century, half century especially, tariffs is not one of them. They've effectively given up control of tariffs to the executive branch. That goes back about a century now. White Houses, going back, have been issuing tariffs since the early 20th century. Congress basically got out of the game despite constitutionally having that power. So you have the courts here saying, whoa, 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 whoa. This is a power of Congress, and you can't just take this random International Emergency Economic Powers Act and use it to tariff the whole world, nearly the entire world. He has imposed baseline tariffs of 10% on most imports from almost every country. Now, Trump's arguing here that it is an emergency based on the state of the economy, how he views the manufacturing industry, and the state of trade, the trade imbalance that he sees in dozens and dozens and dozens of countries around the world. He argues this will bring back manufacturing, and this has raised tens of billions in new revenue. As of July, we'll wait on August numbers, $142 billion has been raised by the tariffs. Remember, when tariffs are imposed, importers that bring in goods have to pay those tariffs, and then they have to choose. Do they charge American consumers 100% of those tariffs, part of those tariffs, or do they eat the tariffs completely? But the U.S. Treasury is now $142 billion richer, and the monthly deposits here of tariffs represent about 10% of the cash deposits coming into the U.S. government on the monthly basis. So you have heard arguments, including President Trump over the weekend, saying this is going to bankrupt this. This is a 1929 Great Depression level. If this stays into effect here, this will, quote, literally destroy the United States of America, was one thing Trump wrote over the weekend. Now, just for context, the annual budget for the United States government is about $7 trillion. This is $142 billion. So just a couple of percentage points of $7 trillion. Not significant, but not insignificant. It would definitely create a slight hit here. They'd also have to figure out the logistics of returning all this money to all these importers or countries around the world. Now, as Trump vows to fight this, an ally of his, Senator James Lankford, a Republican from Oklahoma, was on Meet the Press over the weekend talking about this. And he said this is going to be pretty disruptive to business, getting behind the White House here. Here's a bit of Lankford.
Every time there's a new court hearing, every time there's a new change, it's destabilizing for every one of our businesses. So let's get all these things resolved as quickly as we possibly can.
Now, along those lines, we should remind everyone that these tariffs will stay in effect through October at least. The court here, acknowledging that the Supreme Court is above them, gave the administration time to appeal its case, which is happening. And so the tariffs remain in effect here. They don't get reversed immediately because that would create some chaos here. And then we will have to see how this plays at the Supreme Court level. I imagine the court might freeze, any change here as they consider whether what the president did here was constitutional. One important thing to note, not all of the tariffs that Trump has issued here fall under this emergency law. He has been more precise with other tariffs that fall under other sections of the U.S. Trade Act. We're talking about the tariffs on steel, aluminum, some of the tariffs on China that have been justified under other laws. No legal issues there. Those are laws in the past that have been used for tariffs. It's his Emergency Powers Act that Trump used to tariff most of the world, and some of these most extreme tariffs. Those are at issue here. And again, that's something, Jill, we will watch before the Supreme Court in the coming weeks.
All right, time for the speed read. Starting overseas from the BBC, more than 800 people have been killed and at least 3,000 were injured after a 6.0 magnitude earthquake struck eastern Afghanistan. That earthquake struck about 17 miles outside of the city of Jalalabad late Sunday. That is a city of about 150,000 people. The UN said that as many as 12,000 were directly affected. The epicenter was in a remote mountainous region, so that's made rescue operations incredibly difficult. The hardest hit was Kunar province, where entire villages built with mud brick homes have been destroyed. Roads in the area have been blocked by flooding and landslides, so helicopters have become the main lifeline. Rescue teams say a lot of victims are still trapped under rubble, and they fear that the death toll will climb significantly, which unfortunately, Moshe, is something that we do tend to see with these types of disasters.
Yeah, just bad communication, terrible infrastructure existing before these earthquakes. And Afghanistan has been hit by a number of deadly earthquakes in recent years. More than 1,000 people died in earthquakes back in 2022 and in 2023. And it comes as the country's already been reeling from drought, from aid cuts, from an unprecedented hunger crisis. Half the population of Afghanistan is already reliant on humanitarian aid. And then, of course, the Taliban took over a few years ago. Most of the world was like, we are out based on how the Taliban treats women. And so ultimately, that has just created even more of a situation of need in major parts of Afghanistan. And again, that's before some of these natural disasters.
From Reuters, the latest sign that Russian President Vladimir Putin is not changing his ways anytime soon. The head of the European Union, President Ursula von der Leyen's plane was targeted by suspected Russian GPS jamming while trying to land in Bulgaria this weekend. Jamming is a strong radio signal. It overwhelms wireless communications. For planes, that means that GPS and navigation systems can be disrupted, forcing pilots to rely on backup tools like radar, visual cues, and even paper maps to land safely. Pilots who were carrying the head of the EU safely landed using ground-based navigation systems and paper maps in the cockpit. For months, countries bordering Russia have warned of increased electronic activity interfering with flights, ships, and drones. An EU spokesperson said the incident reinforces the bloc's, quote, unshakable commitment to ramp up defense capabilities and support for Ukraine against Russia's 3.5-year-old invasion.
And it reinforces that Putin just doesn't care. Even a couple of weeks after that summit with Trump and some of the hopes, the optimism that he might meet with Zelensky, that's been quashed as of last week. We've been talking about that on this podcast. And the fact that, his military is still messing around here with the head of the EU's plane landing in Bulgaria. This is not the first incident we've seen of this, and that's something we'll continue to monitor. Jill, as we talk about Putin and Russia here, there's a major summit that's been happening in the last couple days over in China. That's where Vladimir Putin, the Chinese premier, as well as the Indian prime minister, all meeting in northern China. This summit is part of what they call the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the SCO. Several dozen other countries from across Asia and the Middle East also in attendance. It's also been dubbed at times, Jill, the axis of upheaval. These are all countries that don't love U.S. Supremacy in the world and have been looking to challenge the U.S. and take down the U.S. in various ways, whether it's Russia, China. India has long been courted by the West. It's always been playing this sort of middle ground, especially during the Cold War between the Soviet Union and the U.S. But most recently, you've seen Trump get close to India, but then Trump issued a whole bunch of tariffs on India recently. And so that has sort of pushed India back to China. The Indians, historically, the Indian government has tried to play both sides. And so it was interesting to see sort of this cozy situation happening between Modi, the prime minister of India, Putin and Xi Jinping. Jill, I don't think it's an accident that Modi on his Twitter account posted 2 photos of him hugging Vladimir Putin with the caption, "Always a delight to meet President Putin." So Modi making a point not just of being at the summit, but posting on social media, hugging Vladimir Putin. So this is an organization that is meant to, be in opposition of the U.S.-led global order. The Chinese trying to serve as a counterweight here, trying to give aid to a bunch of countries around the world. And it comes as the Chinese, have their various challenges with the U.S. But as we've liked to say on this podcast, China, the U.S. both acknowledge that they're basically divorced parents trying to manage the world. And so while there's ongoing negotiations with the U.S., they're also an adversary of the U.S. And so that continues. And so they're hosting this meeting. Certainly, Trump is paying attention to it. He took aim at the Indian leader over the weekend on social media. Meanwhile, Vladimir Putin said that he updated the Chinese leader on the Russia-U.S. talks and talked about the things that he feels the U.S. is doing that is hurting the globe. So this is an alliance we'll continue to watch, the Chinese-Russian relationship. And historically speaking, it's interesting because there were, for many decades, Russia was sort of the big brother to China's little brother. And that has now flipped in the last 20 years. China is now big brother. Russia is little brother. And China is offering a certain amount of support, but not too much support as to not upset Donald Trump too much. And so for those of you watching foreign relations and want to understand why things are transpiring the way that they do and how what they call soft diplomacy works, this is effectively all of them sort of poking the U.S.'s eye right now with a reminder that, we don't totally need you, America. So watch how that unfolds this week.
Back here in the U.S. from ABC News, Minneapolis public schools are starting the first day of classes today. And it comes as police have confirmed that 3 more children were injured in last week's shooting at the Annunciation Catholic School in Minneapolis. The police department on Monday announced that there were actually 21 people injured in Wednesday's attack. And that included 18 children between the ages of 6 and 15, along with 3 adults in their 80s who were attending the school mass. Before taking their own life, the 23-year-old shooter killed 2 children, an 8-year-old Fletcher Merkel and 10-year-old Harper Moisky, before eventually turning the gun on himself.
Now, one of the victims that they added here is 10-year-old Weston Halsey. He last week went viral. We played a clip of him on this podcast, put up the clip over on Instagram where he spoke to the media about just what unfolded there inside the church and the friend that saved his life and who was shot as he tackled him in the church to try to make sure he got down. Now, Weston, in that interview, talked about how close he thought he came to being shot. Take a listen.
It was right beside me. I was 2 seats away from the stained glass windows. So they were the shots were right next to me.
That's scary.
Yeah.
You went under the pew after that happened?
Yeah. And
Is that what everyone tried to do?
I think I got gunpowder on my neck.
All right, so you heard that. He thought he got gunpowder on his neck. It turns out that it was actually a bullet fragment. His father revealed over the weekend to NBC News that the fragment actually came close to the boy's carotid artery, and that a doctor described the fact that it didn't hit the artery as a miracle. If the bullet fragment went any further, he would have died. So again, this kid in this interview is talking about, I feel like gunpowder's on my neck, and it is a bullet fragment that is that close to his artery. The family is still waiting to confirm when the surgery to remove the fragment will be scheduled, but they hope it'll be sometime this week. Weston is expected to make a full recovery, and we should add that over at the Hennepin County Medical Center, 3 children and 1 adult still remain hospitalized as of this taping.
From CNN, President Trump will award former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani with the Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor a president can bestow. Trump posted on Truth Social Monday that Giuliani was, quote, the greatest mayor in the history of New York City and an equally great American patriot. Giuliani formally served as Trump's personal attorney. The Monday announcement came after Giuliani was involved in a major car accident in New Hampshire over the weekend, where he suffered major injuries. Trump has been distant from Giuliani for some time, starting after the 2020 election. Giuliani was released from a hospital Monday after that car accident in New Hampshire. The 81-year-old was the passenger in a rented Ford Bronco When it was hit from behind, he was receiving treatment for a fractured vertebrae, cuts and bruises to his left arm and lower leg. The story is a bit wild. So Giuliani's advisor says that Giuliani had actually stopped his car on the side of the road to help a domestic violence victim who had flagged him down. Giuliani called 911 and was waiting until help arrived and then left. And that is when a 19-year-old driver slammed into Giuliani's vehicle at high speed, sending both cars into the median.
Yeah, there's a lot here. Giuliani's getting the highest civilian honor from Donald Trump. They've been on the outs for a while, so that's news. Giuliani was helping a domestic violence victim on the side of a road in New Hampshire late one night this weekend.
Also
that was
news.
Also news. And then Giuliani being in the hospital with these major injuries, including to his vertebrae, also news. There's just a lot happening here in these past 72 hours. Now, they made a point in the statement from the Giuliani team to talk about the whole domestic violence incident, even though it does not appear that the 19-year-old was associated with that in any way, who crashed into him. But I guess they were seeking to explain here why Giuliani was parked on the side of a road in New Hampshire over the weekend. That said, it's been a rough few years for Rudy Giuliani. Some of it, well, a significant part of it, Jill, due to his own actions here. He is Trump's, as you mentioned, former personal attorney. He's faced mounting legal and financial issues in recent years. He had his law license permanently revoked in both D.C. and New York over his attempt back in 2020 to undermine the presidential election. The issue, ethics, Giuliani was pushing legal challenges in court that had no factual support behind it. He then went on to plead not guilty to state criminal charges against him for election subversion schemes in both Arizona. In Georgia, 2 election workers won a $148 million defamation case against Rudy Giuliani over the 2020 election. Giuliani had said a lot of critical things that turned out not to be true about them. And the judge said, you know what? He owes you $148 million. So that has meant that Giuliani has had to sell most of his personal assets, though there was a settlement agreement that was reached earlier this year that allows Giuliani to keep a home and some of his most valuable possessions, that we had to auction off a bunch of baseball memorabilia, a bunch of stuff that he had from his years as federal prosecutor, as the mayor of New York. Remember, back after 9/11, he was America's mayor. He was the man who brought down crime in New York. He was viewed as a hero. Speaking from personal experience, Jill, I was the young Fox News producer assigned to cover the Rudy Giuliani for President campaign back in 2007. People forget this. He was number one in the polls in 2007. He had like 45% in the Republican primary. And so I was assigned by Fox News to follow him around for 6 months, running what we could say is one of the most subpar presidential campaigns in history. He would do like 2 to 3 events a week. Didn't really want to campaign that hard. And every time I went to an event with him and covered it, he'd sign a bunch of baseballs. All these people, Democrats and Republicans, would come out being like, oh my God, you're America's mayor. You're our hero after 9/11. And then I would interview these people afterwards and find out that like nearly none of them were registered to vote in New Hampshire or Florida. So it's like, he's talking to all these people, but like none of them can vote for him. This isn't going to end well. And so it did not end well politically in that primary. That was the one that John McCain would go on to become the nominee for the Republican Party but then fast forward to 2020, and then you have the infamous press conference outside the Four Seasons Landscaping instead of the Four Seasons Hotel in Philadelphia.
Oh my God, yeah.
With his hair dye running down his face. And then, I think, the president was embarrassed by the whole thing. So Trump, one of the few people he has not, really been seen publicly with for a while now is Giuliani. But I think maybe given the car crash news, I'm waiting to hear back from the White House in terms of how far back he was planning to give him the Presidential Medal of Freedom here. But one of the stories I was not expecting this weekend, Joe. But we do wish Rudy Giuliani a speedy recovery there. That cannot be an easy injury to recover from, especially at age 81.
Moshe, the other bizarre political story this weekend is that the internet somehow thought that President Trump was dead. And he is not. Okay, so before we get into any of the rumors and speculation, he is not.
It's not clear that he even had any health issues this weekend.
But I think I went on Instagram maybe Saturday morning and I saw a report from someone who was like, the president is alive. And I'm like, what did I miss here?
That
I
might
was
have been
confused.
my report, Jill. That might have been on our Instagram page. FYI, for all of you messaging me on Saturday morning, the president is alive. He just went to go play golf. This is what happened. He did that like 3-hour cabinet meeting on Tuesday. And then since the 3-hour cabinet meeting, where he took questions again for 3 hours, he hadn't been seen on video camera. And so people by Saturday, this is a rare thing for Trump, by the way. I mean, Biden would go a couple of weeks without us seeing him, right? So that was like not abnormal for Biden, which is what always led to rumors that like every couple of weeks, especially in 2024, like Republicans were like, Biden's totally dead, right? Biden's dead, Biden's dead, Biden not dead, right? But Biden would like go, like just not be seen. Well, Trump is seen like sometimes 4 or 5 times a day, right? You know, he's answering questions all the time. Sometimes he answers questions and then he goes to another part of the White House and answers more questions, and just like it's a constant Trump show. Now, the fact that he went Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, not on video camera, people are like, something's up, right? Now, we will note that he did do a nearly hour-long interview with the conservative outlet, The Daily Wire, on camera on Friday. That reporter was like, he was fine on Friday. So when we woke up to rumors Saturday morning that he's dead, we're like, where is this coming from? Now, one thing that did make this suspicious is that he didn't allow the media, he didn't go up to the cameras at all Saturday or Sunday or Monday, which is something he typically does. He finds the cameras. He's like, okay, what do you guys want to know? I have some stuff to say. Do you have any questions for me? So they were held pretty far from him. And we saw him leaving the White House throughout the weekend to play golf, but from afar. But there was no up-close action of him playing golf. And a lot of people in his orbit were sharing older pictures of him playing golf earlier this year, as opposed to this weekend. So it did lead to people's spidey senses being up. Could he have been sick over the weekend, not wanting to speak on camera? Potentially. The White House says, nope, there's nothing to see here, folks. He's totally fine. But again, given that Trump is Trump and you always see him, that I think just for a couple days, suddenly people are like, well, he must be dead. I think part of it might just be liberals wanting to get back at Trump, for all the conservatives who, said Biden was dead every week for like 2 years. And so when we talk about the internet, we're mainly talking about like the liberal internet, and then you have the outraged Republican internet being like, how could you say this about our president? And then the liberals are like, well, you said this about Biden. And Republicans are like, well, this is different. Anyway, I followed social media over the weekend, so you didn't have to. This is a bit of what was going on.
It's so extreme. Like, maybe he was sick. I don't know.
Correct. But the White House didn't admit anything. But this is the thing. If we don't see him on camera today, Jill, like tomorrow we can like have a lengthy discussion about this. But ultimately, we do know that he's alive. There is photographic evidence of him every day, but he just didn't go to the cameras this weekend. And that, in and of itself, is news from this White House.
From Stanford Medicine, a new study finds very young U.S. children are being prescribed ADHD medication too quickly. The Stanford-led study out on Friday looked at about 10,000 preschool-aged kids with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. ADHD is characterized by impulsive behavior along with difficulty paying attention and sitting. That goes beyond the typical kid's energy. But of course, this can be hard to parse out. The study found that these very young kids are being put on medication almost immediately after diagnosis. So stimulants like Ritalin. But that is despite guidelines that say the first step should be behavioral therapies, not medicine. And it can have long-term impacts. Stimulant medications cause more side effects in young patients than they do in older children. And that is because before age 6, children's bodies don't fully metabolize the drugs. Those side effects can include irritability, aggressiveness, and emotional problems.
It comes as the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends that kids ages 4 and 5 try 6 months of behavior therapy before starting any type of medication like Ritalin. That treatment can include activities like making visual schedules to help kids stay organized, or helping parents reward a child's good behaviors and ignore negative behaviors. There's also a new focus, Jill, on diet as well as a potential cause for some behavioral issues. But researchers found in this study that nearly half of young kids are being given drugs within a month of diagnosis. So they're not trying out any alternatives before immediately prescribing medication. Now, most in that group were boys. About 75% of the kids were boys. This study was conducted by analyzing medical records, electronic medical records, over the course of the past decade. One of the issues that was cited here, though, in why behavioral therapy wasn't tried before medication is that a lot of communities lack the specialists to help kids behaviorally and try that therapy. So pediatricians are immediately turning to prescribing medications like Ritalin here.
One researcher said, quote, doctors tell us we don't have anywhere to send these families for behavioral management training. So weighing the benefits and risks, we think it is better to give medication than to not offer any treatment at all. And finally, from the BBC, a bizarre scene at the US Open going viral over the weekend. Video showing Polish tennis player Kamil Majchak, after winning a match on Thursday, giving his hat to a 10-year-old child, or trying to give it to him. But just before he could hand it over, a grown man snatches it from his hand. Turns out that grown man is a Polish businessman. He apologized on social media. We can't really show the video. I mean, we can play it, but it will do no good because it's really a video. It doesn't help to just listen to it. But basically, here is what happened. So this tennis player had just won a 5-set match in New York Thursday. He took off his hat and he gestured for this young boy in the stands to have it. So the tennis player is already looking the other way. And before the boy could grab the hat, that CEO swooped in and took the hat, stuffed it in a bag. The child was stunned. His mouth was agape. I think he said at one point, "What are you doing?" And then I think the internet took over.
The internet took over, Jill. The internet was outraged. Jill, whether you go on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, or X, if you swiped a couple times, you probably saw this clip over the weekend. The images spread widely across social media. Immediately, they identified the CEO, this Polish millionaire, who apparently sponsors the tennis federation that Majchak is in. He's apologizing, saying he's been humbled by all of this. Too little, too late, though. But the tennis player, Majchak, tried to make a point of finding the kid. He's been updating everyone throughout the weekend on his Instagram page. On Saturday, he was reunited with the boy. He posed for a photo. He gave him another hat, more signed gear. Apparently, the boy's name is Brock. And he says, "We wish you a great day. The internet is great." He was so happy to be reunited with him and give him more of his gear. Nonetheless, not sure the CEO is going to recover from this anytime soon, Jill.
Well, apparently the CEO first was kind of like you snooze, you lose to the little boy. He was not apologizing at first.
He was not. He was almost ignoring the fact that he took candy from a baby. Right?
He was like, too bad. He was basically like, too bad.
Too bad. He's like, I grabbed it from you first. And we've seen this, there are incidents like this all the time at baseball games where a home run ball or a foul ball is hit and a young boy or young kid has their glove up and an adult grabs it from them. But this was sort of next level right in front of the athlete. And then he wouldn't even make eye contact with the kid. The kid was looking up at him and he's just stuffing the thing in his bag and getting the player to sign other things in the meantime. So at least for the sake of the kid, Brock, the tennis player, made a point of finding him, giving him more gear. So, I guess you could say the story ends positively. Jill, will end here with On This Day in History. On this day in 1666, the Great Fire of London began. Started in the King's Baker's house. It raged for 4 days, destroyed nearly 80% of medieval London, including the famous St. Paul's Cathedral and thousands of homes. To the clue at the beginning of the podcast. Speak softly and carry a big stick was said by
Teddy Roosevelt, Oyster Bay native.
The pride of Long Island. At the Minnesota State Fair, he was vice president at the time. He coined the phrase. What does it mean? Well, engage in peaceful negotiation and diplomacy, but back it with credible military power. Speak softly, but carry a big stick, if you will. Fast forward to 1963. On this day, CBS Evening News became the first network television broadcast to go 30 minutes at night. At the time, all the network newscasts through 63 were just 15 minutes long. And there was a discussion within CBS, do you think we could fill 30 minutes with news? Is there enough happening in the world? Well, it turns out there was, Jill, because then just a couple decades later, 24-hour news networks would launch like CNN.
But they repeat everything every half hour.
Right, exactly. That was the thing. there's no fresh news for 24 hours, but we can repeat stuff hourly.
And say it's breaking news.
Or sometimes just stay with the same story all day long and just bring on 100 guests to talk about it with different perspectives. All right, on this day, we also want to wish a happy 56th birthday to the ATM. The first ATM made its debut on this day in Rockville Center, New York. It was at the Chemical Bank, and it would go on to revolutionize the banking industry.
Another Long Island connection.
There you go, Jill. It's dedicated to you and Long Island this week.
Thank you, Mosh.
Another major invention turning 40 today, the clapper. Remember clap on, clap off?
The
Before we had
clapper.
apps.
Do I remember?
This was a big thing. They used to try to sell you on TV. It was this thing you could plug your electronic devices into in the house, and then you could just clap.
You just
for
walk
lights to
into a
turn
room,
off, clap,
lights on.
clap twice for the TV to go on.
It is
very
pretty
exciting
cool.
thing.
It was ahead of its time.
No, honestly, it still sounds pretty cool as we talk about it. I don't know anyone with the clapper today, but let us know if you still have a clapper in your house.
In fact, I want a clapper. I feel like this sounds wonderful.
I'm sure it's like really cheap today, and we could buy it on Amazon.
All right, everybody. That is a wrap. Thanks for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us, subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Review us in the App Store.
With a clap. If you clap twice to your phone, you'll leave a positive review.
And if you value our news coverage, consider joining the Mo News Premium community.
Yes, you have one more day today on the special Labor Day sale we had going on. The code is WORKIT, WORKIT, 15% off an annual membership of Mo News Premium. We have a lot of things coming your way. Monthly workshops continue, weekend coverage, our premium podcast, a new Ask Mosh Anything podcast, our exclusive Slack community for thousands of you in the Mo News Premium space, our weekly news quiz. I could go on and on, but you know it's time to join already. mo.news/premium. Code WORKIT.
All right. Bye, everyone.
I can listen to more than the app.